So often you solve one problem without realizing you may be causing problems elsewhere, like shutting down a coal mine. Great, you're stopping all those emissions, adding to the greenhouse gases. But you may be causing massive loss of jobs, poverty, people destroying the environment because they've got to survive.
Her story is legend. At the age of 26, in July of 1960, Jane Goodall traveled from England to what is now Tanzania to study wild chimpanzees. Her discoveries forever changed our understanding of our relationships to other species and have infused conservation efforts ever since. Today, she is, among other things, a United Nations Messenger of Peace and, of course, founder of the Jane Goodall Institute, which works globally in community-led conservation, animal welfare, science, and youth empowerment. Conversations on the Future focuses on fundamental existential issues beyond the daily news. In this conversation, Dr. Jane Goodall shares her thoughts and hopes on the future of our species in a damaged world. Dr. Jane Goodall, thank you so much for doing this. We are at a tipping point in terms of planetary problems like global warming, biodiversity, pollution, particularly plastics. Of this array of issues facing our future, what worries you the most? What should we be paying more attention to as communicators?
Well, that's an awfully difficult question because everything is so interrelated. Climate change and loss of biodiversity, those two are closely linked. I always think when these questions come up that there are people with their particular expertise in dealing with these various problems that we're facing. And so we need all the people working flat out on their portion, and we need collaboration between them and sharing of ideas. So often you solve one problem without realizing you may be causing problems elsewhere, like shutting down a coal mine. Great, you're stopping all those emissions, adding to the greenhouse gases. But you may be causing massive loss of jobs, poverty, people destroying the environment because they've got to survive.
So we live in an era of new uncertainties, of a new volatility. This was all underscored by the pandemic and so forth. And today's younger generations will inherit a damaged planet. But one of your most striking messages has been one of hope and encouragement that solutions can be found at the local level. I wonder if you could hold forth a bit on your advice to, say, a young teenager growing up in an increasingly anxious world.
I met so many young people just like that. And that's why I began the Jane Goodall Institute's program for youth, from kindergarten, university, everything in between, and beyond. It's to counteract this feeling of anxiety, of doom, gloom, and so many of the young people feel helpless. So to tell the young people, what do you care about? Oh, I care really terribly about all the litter and the plastic washing into the ocean. Okay, well, you can't deal with plastic all over the world, can you? But maybe where you live is a problem. Get together with some of your friends, talk about it, see what you can do about it. And then when they start doing that, and because our program is now in 67 countries, then they start getting a feeling of, yes, if we get together, we can.
While on the subject of young people, your Roots and Shoots movement has reached hundreds of thousands, as you said, 67 countries. And you have used the analogy of roots and shoots growing into big plants. Your projects unlock voluntarism. And it all started apparently with a group of teenagers in Dar es Salaam. What was it about that occasion that inspired you? And do you see this tree still growing vigorously?
We decided from the start that because of this interrelationship, every group would choose 3 projects between them, one to help people, one to help animals, one to help the environment, or one big one to help them all. And the analogy of the tree was, take your favorite tree. It probably began from a little seed. Pick that up when it starts to grow. But there's a life force, a magic, I call it, in that little seed, so that those little roots eventually reach the water and push apart the rocks. And that little shoot to reach the sun, which the plant will need, can work its way through brick walls. So the roots and the shoots, hundreds and thousands, millions, billions around the world, can break through and make this a better world. And the tree is growing. The tree is everywhere. And one of our main projects, which kids choose to do, is plant trees, which we need desperately to absorb CO2.
Every successive generation starts from a lower baseline. They have not seen, they cannot relate often to what has been lost. How does one overcome that particular problem?
Well, David Attenborough's done a great job there with his nature films. He was heavily criticized a while back because he never showed the doom and the gloom and the fact that they're all disappearing. But they do serve to give people an idea of what it was like and should be like. And that's the baseline. And once they've watched some of those um, documentaries, and they've been very popular all around the world, then they learn, well, it's not like that anymore. But then they want to work to help to save what's left and increase it.
You have mentioned also the arrogance of humans, our sense of exceptionalism that often blocks us from feeling empathy with other species we share the planet with. And you have advised bringing nature into urban environments. Singapore is an interesting example. As we know, wild otters have recovered and are often seen in the city, and Singaporeans are proud of them. And in India as well, we have examples of remarkable coexistence, notwithstanding rising human conflict with large carnivores and elephants, for example. What are your views on coexistence with nature going forward, or do we risk becoming increasingly detached from the natural world?
Uh, when it comes to coexistence with wildlife, that's something that desperately needs attention. And we see these rewilding programs right around the world. And we see, wolves being reintroduced into Europe, and we see buffaloes and wolves being reintroduced in parts of the United States, and conflict grows. There's heated discussion about it. And we have to work on ways of learning how to manage this conflict. And in some species, it's easier than others. It's not my area of expertise, although I feel very passionate about it. But just one example that I know about, in Africa, chimpanzees in some areas have begun crop raiding because their own resources are diminished. And that has led to conflict with the local people, obviously. If you're poor and a chimp comes and eats your food, then you're going to resent that. So the answer there in some cases is to plant your crops that aren't interesting to the chimpanzees, like sunflower, so that then they're less likely to come and crop raid.
You said nature is so resilient if we give her a chance. And you said we are finally actually using our extraordinary brains, I'm quoting you, to come up with solutions to the problems we have caused. And because of the indomitable spirit shown by those who tackle seemingly unsolvable problems and refuse to give up. That's an interesting thought, the resilience of nature, and we are actually using our phenomenal intelligence. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, well, at last, because, I've always been saying for years that the one thing that makes us more different from the other animals, because, we now know they're sentient, they have personalities, minds, and emotions, but the explosive development of our intellect. And I call it intellect rather than intelligence, because here we are, the most intellectual creature to ever walk the planet, destroying our only home. We've lost wisdom. We've lost the wisdom of the indigenous people who used to say, how does the decision we make now affect future generations? So that's something our youth program is working towards. But we are beginning to use our intellects. Like I just visited a mechanical tree. It goes gradually up to 30 feet, and it's made so that as the wind blows through it, it captures the CO2 in the atmosphere. And then when it's captured enough, it comes slowly down, and that is compressed into carbon, the stuff diamonds are made from. So that's one example of human ingenuity. are being used to tackle these problems. There's many, many more. Yeah, there's many more problems to tackle, but there are groups of people working on all these different areas.
Thank you very much. Dr. Jane Goodall, you have inspired generations. You really are one of the treasures of our time. Thank you for speaking to me on Conversations on the Future. Please stay well out there.
Well, thank you too. Thank you very much. You stay well as well.